Hello and welcome back to My Own Worst Enemy. It is time to start the playthrough of Champion Hill and the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. Now, I am very new to this system, so I will ask that if you catch a mistake that I make, please make note of that in the comments down below. I'm sure I'll make mistakes. I'm learning the game just like you are. That's the intent of all the videos I do. I want to help people learn how to play these games and get them to the table, so we're learning together here. So we are zoomed out right now. This is the east map. And the area we will concentrate on is here where Champion Hill is located, which is really right about here where Stevenson is. So we will zoom in once I start. But first I wanted to go through a couple of things. So this is scenario 7. And there are some special rules that we must consider here. This is one turn, like I said. It's May 16th, 1863. So the special rules. First thing is that leader transfer is skipped in this. So I'm going to grab the player's aid card. And if you look, there is an advanced game sequence of play. And when I saw that, I was kind of bummed that there wasn't a basic one, but then I looked and actually there is a basic one. If you look at the text that is in blue is what we're going to be using for the basic game. So step number 2 is the leader transfer phase. Normally what that means is you could select one of your leaders and move them to a subordinate within, I think it was 10 hexes if I remember correctly, but you could transfer the leader. So we're going to skip that in this, we're going to skip it totally, it says. So then it says turn 1, the Union player is going to win initiative automatically. So normally for initiative, you would roll 2d6 and see who wins the initiative, and they would get to conduct their actions. So it's just telling us here that the Union's gonna get to roll first. It also says the minimum die roll for the Union march or activate leader in this action phase, this first action phase, is 2. So if your initiative roll, not your initiative roll, but if you activate a leader and you're trying to roll for activating the subordinates, that the minimum number is gonna be 2. And then it tells us the initiative rolls for the rest of the turn are determined as we would normally. The other special rule, the third one, says that the Confederate movement paralysis is in effect. So that's an advanced game random event that will apply to this scenario. And so the Confederate movement paralysis has to see advanced rule 2.0. So if we turn to advanced rule 2.0, and I will do that, and here it is on page 29. You can see that. So Confederate movement paralysis is going to have the following effects on this scenario. The Union player will win all tied initiative rolls. And then it says, there's a note here about scenario 12, so we're not worried about that. The next thing that this Confederate movement paralysis does, the movement allowance in a Confederate activate leader action is the number shown on the die roll. So there is a rule, normally the Confederates, when they would activate a leader, if you look at rule 5.2, you get a +2 to that die roll. And all they're saying here is the Confederates will not get that +2. It's just whatever they roll. And then likewise, if you want to activate just a single infantry or cavalry unit, then the number is also the die roll. So you would not get a +1 for an individual infantry or cavalry unit. Now, there are no cavalry units in this scenario, so no need to worry about that. Then the final thing tells us that Confederate units may not entrench except in Warren County. So we're not going to be able to entrench in this scenario either. So it's really the main things we need to remember are the initiatives, ties go to the Union, and then the movement bonuses for activating units the Confederates will not get. The next thing is the Hovey unit, and that is, Hovey is located right over here. And it tells us that he may be selected to participate in an assault action with either his own corps leader, McClernand, or the corps leader, McPherson. However, Hovey may not join in an activate leader with McPherson, nor may McPherson attach to Hovey. It also tells us that Blair, who is way up here, Blair may participate in an activate leader or assault action with McClernand or McPherson. Number 6, Union extended march. The Union player subtracts 1 from all extended march die rolls throughout the game. Number 7 says Whitaker Ford, which is located down here. These 2 hexes, so that's Whitaker Ford. Neither player's units may cross or retreat across Whitaker Ford, so that's out of play. Then it says off-map retreats. Units may retreat or route into hypothetical hexes off the western map edge without any retreat loss penalties. But units are immediately removed from play and may not return. So if you come off of this edge along here, then the units are just gone from play. So that is it for special rules that we will need to consider for this particular scenario. I did go over the victory conditions in the first video in this series. Basically, the Union's going to get victory points for holding certain locations, Champion Hill, which is here where Stevenson is, and then this hex back here, 2730 Coker, and then these fords that go across Baker's Creek, they will get victory points for those. In addition, they'll get victory points for routes and losses and things like that. So we'll try to keep track of those as we go along. So with that all said, let's go ahead and zoom in now and take a closer look at the setup. All right, so here we are zoomed in. You can see this a lot better now. You can actually see the names on the units probably. So Champion Hill is here where Stevenson's located. Here's Pemberton. There's a pretty good sized stack below him. Loring is here, Reynolds is back here, Grant is here, and the various other units are around here. Now, one thing to note is that Blair and Smith are not in the command range of any of these leaders yet. We could change that once we activate, say, McClernand. But as for right now, these units are not in command range of any leader. So that's something to note. We will consider that as we move along. Now, so the first thing we would do is the random events phase. And we are told that if a scenario wants you to use a random event, then they will call it out in the particular scenario. In this case, like I said, we do have the random event that we're using in this scenario is the Confederate movement paralysis. So we will have that in effect for this entire turn. The next thing we would do would be the leader transfer phase, but we are told to skip that. So the next thing we would do would be the action cycle, and we would go into the action phase. The first thing in the action phase is the initiative segment. Well, we were told that the Union has won the initiative and they will get to go first. So what can they do now that they've won the initiative and they can now take an action? They can conduct a march, which is movement. They can activate a leader, which would, if you activate a leader, say in this case they chose to activate McClernand, then McClernand could activate subordinates within his command range. His command range is 3. It's going to be 3 for all of these leaders. So McClernand is here. Parr, you can see, is also green. He's under what is that? The 13th Corps, I believe it is. So Hovey is as well. So I could activate those along with this activate leader action. I could not do it for AJ Smith though, even though he is under McClernand. He's out of his command range. 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's 4. He needs to be within 3. Another thing we could do is an assault, but we're nowhere near that yet. You'd have to have a leader and some units around to do that near the enemy. We could burn a railroad station. That's not going to be an option in this particular scenario, or we could entrench. So what does the Union want to do here? So if you watched the previous video, I did kind of a battle plan where I wanted to move these units. I showed where I wanted these units to move. Now that was just an overall high level idea of what I wanted to do, but as you look at the map, you can see that I'm kind of restricted by how I can move because I want to stay on these roads. And if I come off these roads, then movement is going to come to a snail's pace and I'm not going to be able to really do anything. I'm going to want to stay on these roads as much as possible. So what I think I want to do primarily is I want to have some units come down and hit Champion Hill. And I've got Hovey here with, how many does he have? He's organized, he has 9. And then under Grant, we have McPherson and Logan. Logan has 12, so I'd love to get Logan down there. Now, you notice Logan is under McPherson, and then Hovey is under McClernand. But you'll remember the special rule told us that McClernand, well, rather that McPherson cannot choose Hovey under an activate leader. So if I were to activate McPherson, he would not be able to activate Hovey. He could activate Crocker, though. So again, me being new to this system, this is a learning thing for me. So as far as strategy goes and knowing the best way to maneuver these units, that's going to take several playthroughs for me to actually learn what I need to be doing. So if you're a seasoned player, some of these moves that I do are probably going to be amusing to you. But that's okay, we're learning. I'm going to try to do the best I can though. So I think what I'm going to do is activate McClernand here. So I'm going to activate leader. That's going to be our action. And so to try to help me stay on track as far as the rules go, I'm going to follow the rule book. This is rule 5.2, activate leader. We're just going to go down the numbered list here to make sure we do this correctly. The first thing we do is we choose an eligible leader. Well, I've done that. I've chosen McClernand. So now we're going to select the subordinate units to McClernand that we want to take an action with. So the rule book tells us that the units that we select with this activate leader action must be fatigue level 3 or less. So in this case, we have no fatigue on any of these units. No fatigue markers are out. Save, however, you note down here, Reynolds for the Confederates is at fatigue level 2 at the start of the scenario. So there you can see that fatigue marker on Reynolds. But the Union is fresh. They have no fatigue markers whatsoever. So we're going to select those units, and I am going to say it's going to be Hovey B, and then it's going to be Osterhaus here, who has 6 units, and Carr, who has 7. And like I said, Smith is out of range. So these are the 3 units that we're going to activate along with this leader. So it's 3. Now there are game markers you can put down to show which units you are activating with the leader. I'm not going to put those out. It's pretty easy for me to remember that it's those 3. All right, so the next thing we need to do is to determine how much movement we are allowed here. So for Union infantry leaders, we will roll a d6 and we will increase that result by 1. Now remember, there's a special rule in effect that says that for this activation only, the minimum that the Union can roll here is a 2. So if we roll a 1, well, that'll become a 2. So I'm going to grab the dice tower. We're going to see if we can get this on screen here. I think we can. Just barely. And so I will grab a blue d6 and we're going to roll this and we will add 1 to it to see what the movement is going to be for these units. And we roll a 3, we add 1 to that to get 4. These units, and I'm going to grab let me just grab a blue d10 to show that. We'll put it off to the side. So they've got 4. Well, let's see, I'll put it over here. So the Union, these 3 selected units will get to move 4. So continuing along with the activate leader rules, it says the 4th thing we could do, well, we just did it. So we determined the movement allowance, and that's going to be used by every unit selected for participation in this activation. So we've got our 4 marked here. Now this was kind of a thing I complained about in the last video. There is an actual leader movement allowance chit that you can put. It says on the movement track, and if you look at the map, the east map does not have that movement track, which is, I think, kind of a wasted opportunity. There's plenty of room on the map to have included that. But that's okay, we're going to use this D10 to show that we have 4. Next thing we can do is the active leader may transfer to any hex occupied by a subordinate unit, including artillery, selected in step 2. So of these 3 units I have selected, and remember McClernand is currently with Osterhaus. I'll show you Osterhaus underneath here. So these are the 3 we've activated. So currently he is attached to Osterhaus. So what it's telling us here is we selected these 3 units with the activate leader. Now we can move McClernand to either Hovey or Carr. And looking at the setup here, I think maybe I might want to do this. I might want to move McClernand to Carr, because then if he's sitting here now, A.J. Smith is in his command range, and we could move, and let's see, Carr, 1, 2, 3. Actually, Hovey they would all be in his command range. So I think we might want to do this here. So it says this transfer is voluntary and may only take place before any units march. Place the leader in the hex to which it transfers. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to transfer McClernand to Carr. And so now if we win the initiative again, we will be able to actually activate all 4 of the units underneath McClernand. And of course, it's telling us in the rules that you have to attach the leader to a unit in that hex. Of course, Carr is there, so that's who he's attaching to. And now step 6 says the active player chooses a single unit to perform march or entrenchment action. The unit must have been selected in step 2, and that's where we chose the 3 that were going to be activated with this leader activation. And it says the unit must choose the same action, march or entrenchment, that was designated for each unit in step number 2. And now the unit's chosen fatigue level is immediately increased by 1. So this is where we're going to get a fatigue marker. So let me grab a fatigue level 1 marker, and we'll start with Hovey first. So now there's the fatigue level 1. He gains that, and we're just going to put that underneath the We'll just put it on underneath the Hovey marker itself. So now he's fatigue 1 because he's taking an action. He's been ordered. And then the rules go on to tell us that we use this number that we've derived from the die roll. So we're going to do that. And it also tells us that we could enhance the movement allowance by making a forced march. So a forced march could potentially get us some extra movement points on top of this 4, but it comes at a cost, and we could lose manpower from doing that. And I think we probably also would get fatigue added. Let me look real quick at the forced march section. Well, the unit would become disorganized, it says, and then you could potentially lose manpower. So we don't want to do a forced march here. And then it tells us now the unit performs its march. As it expends MP, the active movement allowance marker is adjusted downward. And we just have to track it in our heads here. We have 4, so once it hits 0, the march is over. Now, another thing to consider here is that we can attack while we're on the march. So we have 4. We could go 1, 2, 3, 4 and attack Stevenson on Champion Hill there. And if we did that, if we chose to do that, we would move 1, 2, 3, and then that would leave us 1 movement point left over to. So yeah, if he moved 1, 2, 3, he would still have 1 left over. The best he could hope for is a hasty attack there, and that would be a -1 to his combat die roll. So I think I am going to move Hovey up 1, 2, 3 and do a march attack on Stevenson there. So we would move Hovey up to here. So again, that's 1, 2, 3, and we are going to attack now. Let me move Stevenson so we can see what's underneath here. I'll put him down here at the bottom. So Lee is exhausted under there, and he's disorganized. So combat value is 3 because he is disorganized. So let's go ahead and run down the numbers for combat here. So Hovey's attacking with 9, and the Confederates are defending with 3. So that's going to put the combat ratio rather is going to be is 3 to 1. So if we look at the ratio chart, the attacker to defender ratio is 3 to 1. That's going to give the Union, the attacker, a +2 on this roll. And the next thing we're going to look at is the tactical modifier. So here, that's the highest tactical value among the leader units involved in this. So for the Hovey B unit, his tactical value is a 2. And Lee, you can see there's also 2, but don't forget that Stevenson is in that hex. He has a tactical combat value of 3, so that will be used. So here in this case, it would be 2 minus 3, so it's going to be a -1 for the Union because of the tactical modifier difference. So our artillery modifier is next. Hovey has an artillery value of 3. Lee has an artillery value of 1. So to get the artillery value differential, we would subtract the 1 from the 3, so that would be a 2. And there are a couple of things to note here. If we look at the artillery modifier summary table, we are on the 2 column, and if you look at all the column, let me show you this. If you look at the 2 column there, you can see that NE is the result for everything on that column, and that NE would result in a no effect. The other thing to note is that this is Champion Hill. So that is a hill, and that terrain is a hill. And even if we could use artillery, it tells us that if we're on a hill that we would have to roll a die, and if the result was even, then we would use the modifier, and if it was odd, we wouldn't use it. So in any case, there's going to be no effect from artillery in this combat. Which brings us to terrain, and it says a hill, which Champion Hill is a hill. If it's a hill, then the defender will add 1 to his roll. So the Confederates will add a +1 to their roll for that. And continuing along, this is not an assault action. There's no rain, demoralization doesn't apply, and there's no flanking to consider here. So looking at the modifiers, I do not see any additionals. So the Union will end up with a +1 to the die roll, and the Confederates will also end up with a +1 to their die roll. So let's go ahead and I'll move this to the side, we'll need that again, but let's go ahead and put the dice tower back out. I will grab both D6s. Now we will roll this. I've got gray for the Confederates and blue for the Union. And we will roll these and add 1 to the die roll for each. So we roll. So that is bad news for the Union. So that's a 2 plus 1 is a 3. And we'll just set this off to the side. And then for the Confederates, they rolled a 6. Plus 1 is 7. So what you do is you take the attacker's die roll and you subtract the defender die roll. Or rather, the defender's modified die roll is subtracted from the attacker's modified die roll. So in this case, it's 7, and it would be 3 minus 7. So the result would be a minus 4 for the combat result. So we take that result, we look at the combat chart for the attacker. The attacker's combat strength was 9, so that puts us on this 7-11 column. With the minus 4, that's going to be a 2D result for the Union. Now for the Confederates, they were at strength 2. I believe it was 2. It was. So they're on this column. Minus 4 is a dash, which is no effect. So the Union, terrible attack here. They're going to suffer a 2D result. So the 2 in that 2D result is a manpower loss of 2. Let's do that first. So that means that this 9 is now going to become an 8. Let's see if that flips to an 8. Well, that's disorganized, so that's not going to do us any good. So we'll grab an 8 marker, get rid of the 9, and then that capital D is a disorganized fatigue result, so the unit strength marker is flipped to its disorganized side. So this organized 8 now becomes a disorganized 8. Flip to show that. And in addition, the unit's fatigue level is increased by 3 to a maximum of 4. Well, in this case, they already had 1, so adding 3 more to that is going to put them at a 4. And so I will replace that with a 4 to show that they are at fatigue level 4 now. Well, let's put all this back together. And Stevenson is back here. And so there was no effect to the Confederates on that. The dash means nothing happens to the Confederates. So that was a horrible attack there for the Union. Again, probably showing that my lack of experience with figuring out how to maneuver these units. Also some bad die rolling there, so I can't take all the blame. But another thing to note is because now they're now fatigue level 4, that if they had leftover movement points, they didn't. But if they did, then they would have lost those. Now I'm also going to take one of these click markers, health markers, and move this up to 1 to show that there is 1 loss in manpower for the Union. That will just help me remember when we calculate victory, how many points to give the Confederates for inflicting that manpower loss on the Union. I'll go ahead and get these dice and the dice tower out of the way again. So that was a brutal attack for Hovey there, and not good at all. So let's get this back over to show that we still have 2 more units to move. We still have Osterhaus and we have Carr to move. So Osterhaus has 6 organized units and he can move 4. So if we move him along the road, we could have him come down and he could try to attack Lee under Stevenson there. I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to attack the Pemberton stack because that's, I believe that there are 18 strength points worth of units under Pemberton there, so he wouldn't definitely not want to do that. So we also don't want him to be attacked by that Pemberton stack. I was thinking I could move him down here, so McClernand 7 and 6, so we could move Carr down with him. We move him here, and maybe we don't attack with Osterhaus. Maybe we don't attack with Carr either. Maybe we just move and just have them stack here for now. So let's see. I think next we'll have, let's move Carr. Let's see. I'm looking at the rules here. If I wanted to move Carr, I'd want to stay on this road, but that would involve going through Osterhaus. And I know that there is if you enter a friendly occupied hex, you have to pay additional movement costs. And I'm looking at the rules because I want to make sure there's a road there. And I can't remember if that has any bearing on this penalty or not. I'm looking on page 10, enter friendly occupied hex. I don't think that the fact that there's a road there matters. I think you're still going to pay this movement penalty because you are entering that hex, which in this case already contains 6, I believe. Yeah, so if it's 3 or more, and this has 6 in it, then you would pay a movement cost. So on this chart on page 10, if the combined combat value in the hex is 3 to 11, and this is that rough terrain? Yeah, that's rough terrain. So this says it would be a +1 to the movement. And again, I'm looking to see if a road would negate that, and I'm not seeing that it does. So if I did this, if I moved R, it would be, we've got 4 movement, so it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And to do an attack there, that would not be good, because if we look at the attack summary, we would have no movement cost to spend on this, and that would cause a -3 to this roll, because it would be a column of route attack, and a column of route attack would be a -3 to the combat a roll, so that would not be good. So let's see, we could move Osterhaus first and get him into here, but then we would still, if he moved down R and he tried to come into this X, he's still got to pay that, so it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So either way, he's going to end up here with no movement points left. Osterhaus could come down 1, 2, and he would have 2 movement points left, which he could perform a normal attack with. So maybe we want to do that instead. So let's move Osterhaus next. Now he's going to get a fatigue marker for this. Knocked him over there. He doesn't get disorganized, or exhausted, I should say. We get this out of the way for a second. So what's going to happen is he will gain a fatigue 1, and he's going to end up 1, 2. Going to come down here, put his fatigue marker back on, and he has 2 movement left over to conduct this march assault, which will be on Champion Hill. But let me look. Is there a there's a road that leads to Champion Hill? All right, so march assault, and he has, it'll be a normal assault because he has 2 movement points left over. All right, so Osterhaus is attacking Champion Hill here, Lee under Stevenson again. It is, the Union has 6, the Confederates have 3. So the ratio, the combat ratio is going to be 2 to 1. That's going to give a +1 to the Union. Tactics, again, Osterhaus has 2, Stevenson has 3, so -1 for the Union because of that. No other modifiers I can think of there for the Union, so that's just going to be a straight die roll for the Union. The Confederates are still on Champion Hill, so the hill gives them a +1 for terrain. They're going to get a +1 to this die roll. So again, maybe not the smartest thing to do. You can only hope that the Union rolls high here. So let's get the dice tower back out. I'll grab the 2d6, and we will roll, and the Confederates will get a +1 to the roll. And this time the Union rolls high, so they rolled a 6, and the Confederates rolled a 3, +1 is a 4, so we'll convert that to a 4. So in this case, it's going to be 6 minus 4 is going to be a +2. Let me get this out of the way. So we're looking at a +2 on the combat chart. The Union, the attacker, had 6, and a +2 is a capital D and a little a. So we know what the big D we've had before. That is a disorganized fatigue. That little a is a unit may advance after combat if Champion Hill is vacated. So for the Confederates, they had, Lee had 2. He's on this first column, and a +2 is a D and a little r. So that little r is going to be a unit must retreat. So this ought to be interesting. So let's start with the Confederates first. I'm going to grab Stevenson here to get him out of the way. There's Lee. And actually, I don't know why I said 2, it's 3. Does that change anything? No, it's the same columns, so they're still going to get the DR result. We just saw this. The unit is flipped to its disorganized side, which I believe it already is on. So it is, and it says if it's already disorganized, it just remains so. Now the fatigue level is going to get increased by 3. So they had no fatigue, so they will go to fatigue level 3. So we'll get one of those markers out. So Lee is now going to be fatigue level 3, still going to be disorganized. So that takes care of the capital D. Now the little r is a unit must retreat. So let's turn to 7.6 and see what that means. And looking at the rules, it says that there are 4 types of retreats: normal, defender voluntary, rout, and cavalry retreat. In the normal retreat, which is what we have here, a player must retreat all of his defending units a minimum of 2 hexes and a maximum of 4. There are some restrictions. There are terrain restrictions, and retreating unit may not enter the hex where retreat began. Let's see, adjacent, closer to the attacker, cannot end up closer to an attacker, I suppose is what they're saying. Retreat chart 1. A player must use retreat chart 1 in any of the following cases, or the first hex entered in a normal or voluntary retreat, which is what we have here. So let's take a look at retreat chart 1. So looking at retreat chart 1, priority number 1, manpower loss is 0. Retreat follows road, pike, trail, or railroad into hex more distant from active enemy unit than the hex retreated out of. That hex is neither in enemy zone of control nor enemy occupied. So if they just come straight back off of Champion Hill, that is certainly a valid retreat. So 2 minimum. I'm looking to see if we're going to bring him back 1, but he's got to go minimum of 2. So we can cross this bridge and end up back here with Reynolds. And I was looking to see if there were any limitations on retreating into a friendly hex, friendly occupied hex. I don't see any. So I'm thinking they could retreat just 2 back to where Reynolds is located, and that would be a legal thing to do. I think that's legal. Again, let me know in the comments below. If not, I'm going to retreat Lee. This Lee division is going to come back. Actually, I think it's a brigade. It is. It's going to come back 1, 2 to end up with Reynolds. So I'm going to put him here. Well, let's put his, we're going to put his marker and then his fatigue and then Lee. So now he has suffered his capital D and his retreat. He's back here with Reynolds, and now we go to the Union. They had suffered a capital DA result, so let's apply the capital D first. That's going to flip this 6 organized side to its disorganized side. And then we're going to get 3 additional fatigue. So that's going to bring Osterhaus's fatigue up to 4. We'll put that back up. Okay, so the little a means we can advance after combat. It's up to us if we choose to do that or not. And it says that it is not considered movement, so we don't have to expend any MP to do this. It can enter or exit enemy zones of control or advance from one enemy zone of control to another without penalty. And then it tells us that if we have advanced and we, regardless of whether or not a unit obtaining an A advances, its march may continue as long as it did not suffer a DE. Okay, so they're saying that if we had not suffered the capital D and we had movement points remaining, we could move, but we didn't anyway, so that doesn't really matter here. So it's up to us. Do we want to advance onto Champion Hill? I'm going to say yes, we do. So we're going to move Osterhaus forward. So now the Union occupies Champion Hill. So that's 2 of our units moved. We still have Carr to move now. We have 4 movement points. So what do we want? Where do we want to move Carr? So here we could move Carr forward. We can go 1, 2, 3. Have to stop here because this is in enemy zone of control of both the Pemberton stack and the Loring stack here. And even if not, let's see, 1, 2, 3. He still couldn't go to Champion Hill because there's only 4 movement points, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get to Champion Hill. He can't do it anyway, like I said, because there's an enemy zone of control here. So we can move him here and either attack one of these 2 stacks or just end the march there. And like I said, there's 18, I believe, combat strength points in this stack. I think there's 15 in the loring stack. So we don't want to attack either one of those stacks because we're only looking at, I think it was 7. Yeah, 7 for Carr. So let's bring Carr down 1, 2, 3. So this will give him a fatigue marker. Let's go ahead and put our fatigue marker on Carr. And 1, 2, 3. I just realized as I'm doing this that I transferred McClernand to Carr with the intent that that would help me move Smith later, but clearly that's not going to be the case. Because now Smith is outside of the range of McClernand again, but that's okay. And so we will end the march for Carr there. So all 3 of our units under our Activate Leader action have now moved. And we are now at the end of this activation segment for the Union. So that completes the first activation segment. Now a new action phase begins. The action phases repeat until both players pass. So here what happens is we go back into another action phase where we're going to start over and roll for initiative again, and then whoever wins the initiative will take an action. Let's go ahead and get the dice tower back out yet again. And here we're going to be rolling for who gets the initiative. Remember, the Confederate movement paralysis is in effect, so the Union will win any tie die rolls here. So we're going to roll 2d6 to see who gets the initiative. And it's Confederates, so the Confederates will win the initiative for this action phase. How do the Confederates want to respond? So we have now Carr sitting here, who is disorganized, and I think what is his effective combat value now? Well, he's not disorganized, that's right, he just marched down, so he's still at a 7. Carr's sitting there with 7, and Osterhaus, who took Champion Hill, who is disorganized, I believe, is at a combat value effectiveness of 4. So we could activate a leader or a unit in one of these stacks to attack McClernand and or Osterhaus. So let's see what's in this Pemberton stack. You may want to try to retake Champion Hill. There's Barton, who is at 4. And here's Cumming, who's at 4. Bowen, let's see, I'm going to have to, this is kind of an unwieldy stack, and this is where I probably ought to be using the off-map markers for this, but Bowen, under him is Green, oops. Green has 4, but it is not disorganized. Those 4 are not disorganized. And then Cockrell has 6 and is not disorganized, but he is exhausted. So the best option there would be maybe to activate, I don't think we even need to activate Green. We activate the leader Bowen there, with the hope that we would knock Osterhaus off of Champion Hill, and then maybe we could move Green on top of Champion Hill with Cockrell. I think the Confederates are going to do just that. I think they're going to activate Bowen, activate leader. So they're going to activate the leader, which they're going to use to activate Green and Cockrell. Although, hold on a second. So this is me being new to the system again. So there is another option here. And that other option is an assault, because we are in, all these units are in the same hex. So if I were to activate Bowen, who is attached to Green, I could conduct an assault with Green and Cockrell. Both of those units could attack Osterhaus on Champion Hill there. And that might be the smarter thing to do. Now Pemberton is there as well, but I can't do a grand assault because there's no more adjacent Confederates to Osterhaus on Champion Hill. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to have an assault here. We'll get to see what an assault looks like, and hopefully I'll do it correctly, and if not, you'll let me know. So let's go ahead and put, so this is Bowen and Green, and Cockrell will be involved in this. I'm going to kind of pull them out so we can see what's going on here. try to put these so that we can see them. And what that'll mean is these units are all going to be involved in this. So Barton and Cumming will not be involved in this. So we will just put them back X for now. And Pemberton is also, put him out of the way for now. So what we're going to have are these units are going to be involved in this assault on Osterhaus on top of Champion Hill there. All right, so on page 12, we're going to run through the attack procedure here for an assault action. So the first thing that's going to happen is, well, we're going to select our participants. We've already done that. We have Cockrell and Green are going to be involved in this assault from the Pemberton Hex to Champion Hill, where Osterhaus is. First thing we're going to do is put a fatigue marker on each of those units. So each of these units will earn a fatigue marker, fatigue 1. We've already selected our target. There's no cavalry retreat here, as there is no cavalry in this scenario. The next thing we're going to do is something called roll for command. Now this roll for command will decide whether or not there's even going to be an assault. It's possible. So it says that there's not an assault. So it says that if the, well, let's see, it says the active player rolls a die. In the basic game, which is what we were doing here, this roll is never modified, except if the defender occupies I don't know, so there's no modification here. If the modified roll is 6 or more, the grand assault does not take place. The grand assault ends, and we return back to step 7 of the assault procedure. If the modified roll is 5 or less, subtract the number rolled from the leader's command value. Leader's command value here is Bowen. It's a 7 for a Bowen. And well, so let's see. Let's grab the dice tower again. We'll put it here. And we'll roll the Confederate D6 to see what we get. We roll a 5, so it says if the modified die roll is 5 or less, subtract the number rolled from the command value. So Bowen has a 7. 7 minus 5 will leave us with 2. Okay, so what does that 2 mean? It says to select eligible hexes from among the 6 hexes adjacent to the defender. So that's here in Champion Hill. The only hex with Confederates, though, is that Pemberton hex we are attacking from. But it says that we would select an eligible number of hexes, not units, that's important, equal to or less than the grand assault. Well, this is for a grand assault, so we're not doing a grand assault. Why am I looking at grand assault? Let's go back. These are side by side in the rulebook on page 12. So let's go back a second. So for an assault, if the roll is 5 or less, apply any appropriate modifier to this roll. And we had no modifiers for this roll. The result is the assault number. So our assault number is 2. If the assault number is less than 0, the assault would end, which it's not. If the assault number is 0 or greater, the assault takes place. Continue the assault procedure. So the assault number 2 is the maximum number of attacking units that may participate. Well, in this case, that's great because it's 2 and we have 2 units we want to participate. Okay, so basically our assault here is going to be with Green and Cockrell. We'll proceed now to normal combat. Let me get the dice tower out of the way for now. So let's see, we start with the ratio. We are attacking, the Confederates have 10 combat value there of 10. The Osterhaus has 4, so that's going to put the Confederates, or the ratio rather, on the 2-to-1 column, and a 2-to-1 for the attacker to defender ratio is a +1 for the Confederates. Tactical value here is, so Bowen is a 3, Osterhaus is a 2, so Confederates will get a +1 for that. This is an assault action, so they'll get +1 for this being an assault action. Again, artillery will not matter here because they're on a hill. The terrain will not come into effect, and that's all the modifiers for the Confederates. The Union will get +1 for being on a hill, and I don't believe they will get any other modifiers. So it's going to be a +1 for the Union and a +3 for the Confederates on this die roll. So let's get the dice tower back into shot here. And we are going to roll the dice and see what we get. So here comes the Confederate assault back onto Champion Hill. And, ooh, not good for the Confederates. Although they do get a +3, remember, so this becomes This 1 becomes a 4, and for the Union, the 5 becomes a 6 because they had a +1. So the Confederates rolled a 4, the Union rolled a 6. So we'll start with the Confederates first. So the difference here is a -2. So the Confederates were the attackers, and they had 10. So they're on the 7 to 11 column here at a -2. So it's going to be a 2D result. That sounds painful. And then the Union, so let's see, the Union, they're the defenders, right? So they had, what did I say? He had 4. Osterhaus had 4 minus 2 is a little F. So they get a little F result. So we'll go ahead and apply that to the Union here. So it's an increase of fatigue to by 1 level. Well, they're already at 4, so they can't take any more, and I don't believe anything else happens then. So let's look at the rules. Letter results, F, fatigue -1. Fatigue level is increased by 1 to a maximum of 4. So I guess that's going to be no effect on Osterhaus there. So, but these units suffer, let's see, 2D. So to apply the 2D result to the Confederates, since this was an assault, it's a little different. So it says, applying the results for the attacker, the attacker's number result applies to the attacking force as a whole, not to each individual unit. So we had a 2, and we're going to have to subtract 2 from the Cockrell and Green as we see fit. And I'm assuming that means we can take both off of Cockrell, or maybe 1 each from each of the units. So let's take them both off of Cockrell. We'll say Cockrell took the brunt of the fire there. So we're going to take Cockrell now down to 4. So Cockrell is down to 4. That's the number portion. And then it says the letter result applies to each participating unit. So the D is going to apply to both Cockrell and Green here. And by now we know that that D means that each of these will be flipped to their disorganized side. So let's do that. So that 4 is now a disorganized 4. And this 4 is now a disorganized 4. And then the other part of this is the fatigue gets increased by 3. So that's going to bring both of these up. They're already at 1, but they're both now going to be a 4. So it's going to be a 4 and a 4. And that's going to be it for that assault. That's the result. Not a good result for the Confederates there. So let's go ahead and get these dice out of the way, and let's place these units back on their stack, which is getting very unwieldy now. To the point of where I think maybe I might want to bring out the Confederate force display to track these units. But let's see what this looks like if I stack it. Cockrell is disorganized and fatigued. Still have Stevenson sitting down here off the map because I guess I forgot to put him. He was with Lee. So I'm going to put him back up there with Lee. And so Cockrell is now in this stack, getting very unwieldy. And we'll put Bowen back in this stack. And of course, Pemberton was also still in that stack. That is a chunky stack there. So let's put that back. And that will end the Confederate activation segment. So we'll go right back into Roll for Initiative again. But I'm not going to do that here. We're going to stop it here. We're probably about an hour into this playthrough, and we got to see each side move at least once. And by stopping here also, if I've made any errors, then maybe we can have those pointed out in the comments below. Maybe I can correct them, maybe not. Yeah, we're going to leave it here. So we saw the Union march down and actually take Champion Hill from the Confederates and knocked them right off. And we still have a lot of Union forces back here, looking really bad for the Confederates. When we come back, we will, of course, see what happens. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, so you'll get notification of when the next playthrough appears. And as always, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you back here next time.